On the last day of July 1986, a retired businessman named Chiune Sugihara died in a hospital in Kamakura, south of Tokyo. He was 86. His neighbors knew him as a quiet man who had spent long years abroad working for a trading company, and they expected a small funeral. Instead, mourners began arriving from overseas, among them the Israeli ambassador to Japan, and Jewish men and women who had flown in to stand at the grave of a man their families spoke of by name. That was the week the neighbors learned who had been living on their street. 46 years earlier, in the city of Kaunas, Lithuania, Sugihara had spent about a month of his life doing one thing: writing. Visa after visa, 200 and 300 a day, until his hands cramped and had to be massaged at night so he could write again in the morning. The writing saved thousands of lives. It also ended his career, and for most of 4 decades, almost nobody knew it had happened at all. Sugihara was born on January 1st, 1900, in Gifu Prefecture in central Japan, and he disappointed his father almost immediately. The family wanted a doctor. Chiune sat the medical entrance exam and, by one account, wrote nothing on the paper but his name. His father cut him off, so he paid his own way at Waseda University in Tokyo. And in 1919, he found his way out, a foreign ministry scholarship that sent him to Harbin in northeastern China to study Russian. He was good at it, good enough that the ministry pulled him into the diplomatic corps, and he spent 16 years in Manchuria, a region crowded with Russian exiles, traders, spies, and competing empires. In the mid-1930s, he helped negotiate Japan's purchase of the North Manchuria Railway from the Soviet Union at a fraction of the asking price, the kind of coup that is supposed to make a career. It didn't make his. Japan had invaded Manchuria in 1931, and Sugihara grew disgusted with how Japanese forces treated the Chinese population, so he asked for a transfer home. The Soviets, for their part, remembered the railway deal and never forgave him. When the ministry later assigned him to Moscow, Moscow refused to let him in. So the man reputed to be the best Russian speaker in the Japanese Foreign Service was parked in Helsinki, and then, in November 1939, sent to open a one-man consulate in Kaunas, Lithuania, a city with almost no Japanese citizens in it. He wasn't there for the Japanese, he was there to watch. German troop movements to the west, Soviet movements to the east, and to cable Tokyo whatever he learned. 2 months before he arrived, Germany had invaded Poland from one side, and the Soviet Union had taken the other, and the space between the two armies was emptying itself into the Baltic states. Around 15,000 Polish Jews crossed into Lithuania carrying what they could, and many of them ended up in Kaunas, where the doors of the foreign consulates were still, for the moment, open. On June 15, 1940, Soviet tanks rolled into Kaunas, and the moment closed like a hand. Lithuania was annexed within weeks, and the new authorities ordered every foreign consulate in the city shut by late August. For the refugees, the arithmetic turned brutal. To the west lay the war and the Germans. Around them stood a Soviet state already making arrests. The only physical way out was east, across the entire Soviet Union. And Moscow would permit that journey only for travelers in transit to somewhere else. Somewhere else was the problem. Nearly every country on Earth had spent the 1930s tightening its immigration quotas, the United States included. and a stateless Polish Jew in 1940 could wait years for a number. What the refugees needed was a destination that asked no questions. They found one in the office of a Dutch radio executive. Jan Zwartendijk ran the Kaunas branch of Philips, and in June 1940, he had been named acting Dutch consul, a businessman with no diplomatic immunity, in a city filling with Soviet security police. Prompted by Dutch Jews stranded in Lithuania and backed by his ambassador in Riga, Zwartendijk began writing a carefully worded notation into refugee passports that no visa was required for the admission of foreigners to Curaçao, a Dutch island in the Caribbean. The notation was technically true. It simply left out that landing there required the personal permission of the island's governor, which was almost never granted. It was a destination that existed only on paper, and paper was exactly what the Soviet transit rules required. In under 2 weeks at the end of July, Zwartendijk wrote about 2,300 of them before his office was closed. But a Curaçao notation on its own moved nobody. The route east ran through the Soviet Union to Vladivostok, then by ship to Japan, and for that, every refugee needed a Japanese transit visa. In the summer of 1940, exactly one man in Lithuania could issue those. One morning in the second half of July 1940, the Sugihara family woke to voices outside the consulate. Yukiko, his wife, looked out the window and saw a crowd pressed against the fence. Men, women, and children who had been walking for days, some for months. She described watching them from that window for the rest of her life, how they stood from morning until night, and the next day, and the day after. How, when they saw her looking, they put their hands together as if in prayer. Sugihara asked the crowd to choose 5 representatives. Among the 5 who came inside was Zerach Warhaftig, a Polish refugee and lawyer who would live to sign Israel's Declaration of Independence and serve as a minister in its government. The request was simple: transit visas through Japan, in numbers no consul could quietly approve on his own authority. So Sugihara cabled Tokyo for permission. The reply restated the rules. A transit visa required a valid visa for a final destination, plus proof of money for the journey and the stay. Most of the people at the fence had neither. He cabled again, arguing the case on humanitarian grounds, and he knew exactly what he was asking. Japan was at that moment negotiating an alliance with Nazi Germany. He cabled a 3rd time. The answer did not change. The couple stopped sleeping. If he issued the visas against instructions, Yukiko remembered thinking, then when they returned to Japan, he would lose his job for certain. And they had 3 small children, the youngest born in Kaunas that spring. In the memoir he left behind, Sugihara recorded where the deliberation ended. He came to the conclusion, he wrote, that humanitarianism and philanthropy should come first. Years later, Yukiko put it more plainly. Her husband issued those visas in defiance of his government's orders, she said, because he was following his conscience. The exact day he started has blurred in the records. What is certain is that by the end of July 1940, he was writing visas as fast as his hand could move, and he did not stop. He set himself a quota of 200 to 300 visas a day, each one written out by hand, in an office built for 1 clerk's worth of paperwork. He wrote from morning into the night, skipping meals, while Yukiko packed up the household around him under Soviet orders to leave the country. When his hands seized up, she massaged them in the evenings so he could start again at dawn. Eventually, he enlisted refugees themselves to help with the stamps. Some of them, unable to read Japanese, pressed the stamps in upside down, and the visas worked anyway. The people in the line remembered how fast it could go. Lucille Sepsenvolkami, a teenager who had fled Poland with her sister, pushed her way into the crowded room and told the consul that their father was dead and their mother had no papers of her own. He looked at them sympathetically, she said, and just stamped, gave them the visa right there on the spot. The sisters came out crying "thank you" in Polish, and he raised his hand gently as if to say, "It's all right." Tokyo kept sending dispatches warning him to follow procedure. He kept writing. When the consulate was forced shut at the end of August, he moved into the Hotel Metropolis and wrote there. Witnesses said he was still stamping passports at the railway station in early September, in the last minutes before his train left for Berlin. His official register, the list he sent back to Tokyo, contains 2,139 names. A single visa could cover an entire family, so the count of people who traveled on Sugihara's paper is usually put in the thousands. The famous figure is 6,000, and the honest answer is that nobody knows exactly. What is known is what the paper was worth. Within a year, a Sugihara visa was the difference between a boat to Japan and a pit on the edge of Kaunas. The route the visas opened was long. By rail across the whole of the Soviet Union to Vladivostok, then by ship to the port of Tsuruga on Japan's western coast. Refugees who had left everything crossed Siberia through the winter of 1940 into 41, and the people of Tsuruga remembered the strangers who came off the boats, exhausted, nearly baggageless, alive. Most moved on to Kobe, and when the transit permits ran out, the majority were sent onward to Japanese-occupied Shanghai, where, in practice, nobody asked for a destination visa. Conditions there were crowded and poor, and most of the refugees survived the war. Among the travelers was very nearly the entire Mir yeshiva. Hundreds of rabbinical students and their teachers who crossed Siberia on Sugihara's visas and kept their school running in exile in Shanghai for the rest of the war. Of all the great Jewish academies of Eastern Europe, the Mir was the only one that came through intact. The people who stayed behind were given less than a year. On June 22, 1941, Germany invaded the Soviet Union, and the Wehrmacht reached Kaunas 2 days later. The killing began almost immediately. First in the city's garages and streets, then systematically at the 9th Fort on the outskirts, where tens of thousands were led out in columns and shot. Of the roughly 35,000 to 40,000 Jews of Kaunas, perhaps 2,500 were alive at the end of the war. Across Lithuania as a whole, the proportion murdered was around 90%, one of the highest rates in all of occupied Europe. The line outside the consulate on Viaganto Street had been standing 11 months ahead of that. The distance between the two outcomes was a sheet of paper with a consul's handwriting on it. Sugihara's reward for Kaunas was a string of wartime postings. Prague, then Königsberg, then Bucharest, while the alliance he had cabled against became formal. Japan signed the tripartite pact with Germany and Italy 3 weeks after he left Lithuania. When the war ended, he was in Romania, and the Soviets interned him there with his wife and children for more than a year. They reached Japan in 1947, and the grief arrived first. Haruki, the son born in Kaunas in the spring of 1940, died of leukemia soon after the family returned. He was 7 years old. Then Sugihara went to the foreign ministry to ask for a new posting, and was handed a resignation letter to sign instead. No explanation was offered. He didn't ask the reason. his son Nabuki said later. He just signed and left. The ministry would say it was post-war downsizing. His family never doubted the real reason. He had disobeyed a direct order, and ministries do not forget. His wife said he never once regretted it. Japan's pre-war Russia expert spent the next years selling light bulbs door to door, clerking in a Tokyo department store, then translating Russian for the broadcaster NHK. In the early 1960s, a trading company sent him to Moscow, and he stayed for 16 years, living in a modest room, seeing his family on visits home. All that time, people were looking for him. Survivors scattered from Brooklyn to Tel Aviv knew their rescuer only as Sempo, the friendlier reading of his name he had offered in Kaunas, because Chiune was hard for Europeans to say. And inquiries after a consul named Chiune Sugihara went nowhere for almost 30 years. He, in turn, had no idea whether the people from the fence had lived. He had written the visas and boarded a train, and the war had closed behind him like water. One day in 1968, the telephone rang at the Sugihara home. The Israeli embassy in Tokyo, looking for the man who had served in Kaunas. An attaché named Yehoshua Nishri came to meet him carrying a worn sheet of paper. A transit visa, 28 years old. The document that had carried Nishri and his brother out of Europe. Only then did Sugihara learn that most of the people he had written for were alive. The next year, he visited Israel and was received by Zerach Varhaftik, one of the 5 from the fence, now a cabinet minister. When his son asked him why he had done it, his answer never changed. Because I pitied them, nothing else. In 1984, Yad Vashem named him righteous among the nations, the only Japanese citizen ever so honored. He was too ill to travel, and Yukiko accepted in Jerusalem on his behalf. He died 2 years later, on July 31st, 1986. The mourners arrived, and the neighbors found out. His government took longer still. The foreign ministry apologized to his family in 1991, and in the year 2000, a century after his birth, it unveiled a plaque in his honor, in the same ministry that had handed him the resignation letter. The register he left behind holds 2,139 names. No one has been able to count their descendants.